Welcome to the Zero Proof Life podcast, where we celebrate choosing alcohol-free living. Together, we share experiences, interview experts, and have heartfelt conversations to support each other on a path to a vibrant alcohol-free life. Hi, welcome to the Zero Proof Life podcast. I am your host today, Becca, and I am here with Brandi today, another one of our Zero Proof Life coaches. Hey, Brandi.
Hi, Becca.
I'm so glad you're here today. We're just going to chat. We want to introduce ourselves to you and let Brandi tell you a little bit about her story. Brandi, first, I want to just kind of ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you live, all the things.
Yes. Thanks, Becca. So, a little bit about me is that I live in Southern California and I have been sober now for 6.5 years. And I live here. I live with my husband, who also quit drinking a few years ago, which is really fun. And we don't have children. And so we live a life that is very different in that perspective. And that, a lot of times people are like, what? And you don't drink, because there's that freedom kind of allowed there. And so I've had that question before. And so, no, we really enjoy the area that we live in. I love to take advantage of going and walking by the water and getting to the beach when I can, getting out on the water. Really just kind of, the day to day, our day to day, like my day to day, tends to be on the quieter side. And I have a coaching practice in the Zero Proof Life, and I also have a somatic practice and get to work with clients in that way. And so a lot of my life also revolves around what I get to do in supporting other people. And so there's a lot of focus and attention on the clients that I work with, and then also learning and growth. Some things that I really enjoy. I really enjoy reading. And so I kind of that is a love that came back after I quit drinking. I didn't have the patience or tolerance to read when I was drinking because I'd read and then I didn't remember anything. And so I'm like, how many times do I want to restart these chapters? So I kind of gave up on that love for quite some time. So it's fun to have that back. And I feel like it's interesting. I think, I'm in my late 40s and at this point, and it's fun getting to just kind of relearn myself, get to know myself in this space. And I feel like really getting to know myself maybe for the first time in life in the last few years. And so that in itself has been quite interesting. And so that means getting to know, myself from getting to know myself from what I like to do in the physical realm, like how I like to move my body versus how I feel like I should move it. Letting myself get to like really hone in on my spiritual life. Getting to just explore these different things, really starting to understand my body again, which I had kind of stopped paying attention to for a long period of time. I forced it into a box versus really paying attention to what it wanted and needed. And so, so that's a little bit about me, and what I think is just really relevant at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, having been to visit you, I can attest to the cool area you live in and just how much there is to do outdoors there and being able to be out by that water. You said something that I wanted to touch on, and that was that you quit drinking about 6.5 years ago, and then your husband just a couple years ago. And I know one of the things that a lot of people their story kind of changes when their spouse is still actively drinking. How, not for you to tell his story, but like, how was that for you to quit drinking when he was still actively drinking?
It was interesting, and I can really appreciate where the fears and the concerns and the challenges come for people, because I certainly had them. Um, I So I had been, not to go too deeply into my story, but I feel like this is really relevant to your question, which is I had been questioning my own relationship with alcohol for many years. and it really started happening in my mid 30s, where I felt this real lack of alignment with how I was living my life versus how I wanted to live my life, and who I knew I needed to be and who I wanted to be.
Mhm.
And I could really tell that alcohol was distracting and detracting from that.
Mhm.
And so I mentioned that because, like, the life that he and I built together was very much, it revolved around a lot of drinking, like a lot of social engagements, a lot of walking to the local bars or local restaurants, meeting friends, going out for a date night, and then walking home, having a few more drinks, like Sunday afternoons, going to brunch, drinking, or going to watch football. Like, I mean, it really revolved a lot around drinking. And so I was really scared. I'm like,
Mhm.
who are we?
Yeah.
Who are we as a couple? And who am I in this relationship if I'm not drinking?
Yeah.
And I got to a point where the dissatisfaction inside of me was just so big and great that if I had to find out and be okay with, like, okay, the chips are going to fall where they may, and this might be scary to discover, and there also might be some amazing gifts in here that I have yet to even uncover in this marriage. We've been, at that point, we'd been together for, at that point, gosh, I guess we'd been married for about 17 years at that point, 16, 17 years. So we had a lot of history together. And and we had not vacationed without alcohol, we had not done date nights without alcohol. Like, it was just going to be new, and I was open to the exploring because I was just so unhappy inside of me and how alcohol was making me feel and what I knew it was getting in the way of.
Mhm.
And so, the first few years that I was sober, he was still actively drinking. He was 100% supportive of me not. And I think that was an amazing discovery, even to have, of like him wanting the best for me. And he's like, if this is what supports you, then I support it 100%. And I asked him so many times over the course of that first year, especially, like, are you bummed I don't drink? Like, is this hard for you? And we had some really honest conversations about that. But at the end of the day, they really all came down to him saying, like, I know this is better for you. And I like how you're showing up. And he saw me stepping into myself and into my value and my worth and all of these things that it felt like alcohol had really taken away in so many different ways. And so to have that support from him was just immense and incredible. And yeah, so I know how hard it can be, though, also being in that place of like, oh, one is, one isn't. And it can be challenging. It has its own element of challenges that show up for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and but for my experience was like, okay, I'm doing this on my own, but I also see there being positive impact in my marriage and in my relationship here. And yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, thanks for asking that.
Yeah. So it's the thing that you guys brought y'all to alcohol was what brought y'all together, but yet also the absence of alcohol also brought y'all together. So I love that. That's so cool.
Oh,
And I
big
love how
time.
you said that because I think we hear this so often how women don't know how to put words to the what you just said, and that like the way you were living was not aligning with what you wanted, how you wanted to show up in your life. And so I think that's just such a beautiful way to say that. So thank you for sharing that. I know I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that question, but
I'm glad you did.
um, when did you first question your relationship with alcohol? Do you remember that, like
Hmm.
specifically when that happened, or just like,
I don't remember the first moment of it happening. It feels like it was rather gradual, but I remember a really jarring event that always sticks out in my head. As I mentioned, my husband and I would go, walk over into the little downtown area by us and then walk home, sometimes stumble home. And and one night I remember us coming home together. We were walking over the bridge and we were both like, it was late. We'd been out all evening with friends. And I remember walking over the bridge. There was a specific place I was at on this bridge to get back to our house. And I just had this like slap in the face is what it felt like of, if something doesn't change, my life is going to look this way in another 10, 15, 20, 40 years. Like it's going to look exactly the same
Mm,
if I don't do something to change this.
mhm,
And it was really like, we have those moments, those like wake up calls in
mhm,
life, and they happen through different times and circumstances. And that was really one of mine. And it was really interesting because I'd been drinking, and like it was like all of a sudden this total moment of clarity that just kind
mhm.
of like just really like hit me. And so, yeah, when you talk about things like divine that are coming through and messages that come through, like that really felt like this is a wake up call and you're being handed this gift
Mm,
of realization. And so I don't even remember when that was, because I
yeah,
think that was still probably a year or two before I really seriously did anything about alcohol. But it was certainly, it really stuck with me.
yeah, I can tell. I can tell. How long do you was that near when you started researching or trying to learn ways, or you just remember that specifically um, in a moment?
Yeah, it was that moment, and I'm trying to remember if like, so something about my story that I think is relevant is I was using various diets to give myself like time off from alcohol.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, I wasn't, I was like overtly doing that,
yeah,
overtly taking time off from alcohol via programs like Whole30, where, hey, no alcohol for 30 days. And it was like a little bit of a, can you do this thing, Brandy? And I think I had done a couple of those. So I had taken, 4 weeks off. I didn't always make it through those. If anything, it was always alcohol that would come in, that glass of Prosecco or the glass of red wine that I'd be like, forget it. It's my birthday. So of course I'm going to drink.
yeah,
Forget Whole30.
yeah,
And I think at that point I had done a few of those. So I'd had these pockets of time without alcohol and had a sense of it, but it always just felt like it still had such a strong pull. And every time I would do one of those, it was like, okay, I took 30 days off. Day one, I'm reintroducing alcohol. Like, this is my celebration because I did the hard thing for the last 30 days.
yeah,
And so that was, so I think it was in the midst of those. And then probably about another year or two before I
yeah,
actually truly made a change.
yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Tell me, is there anything that that is pressing in your mind that you feel really important for our audience to know about your alcohol story? And and with that segueing into how do we get here? Like, how did
Yes.
you land here with all
Uh,
this wisdom?
yes, right? Oh, and so much more wisdom to gather and gain. I I think a huge thing for me is that I would like to share with people is to listen to the nudges, listen to the gentle whispers that like are there in you, that have you listening to this podcast, or have you following certain accounts on social media, or checking out a certain book. Pay attention to those and follow those and see where they might lead. Because I think I read, the first book I read was a book called Blackout, and I read that when I was probably around 34, 35. And so there was a nudge then, right? There was questioning happening. And I didn't stop until I was 40, 41. And so that had been there for 5, 6 years.
Yeah,
And so I remember reading that book and going, "Oh, I'm not that bad." Right? Like having that "I'm not that bad" moment.
the
We love doing
famous,
that.
the
Right?
famous
I'm
words.
going to make it okay for
Yeah,
myself.
yeah,
And so I think though, just like, okay, I read that when I was ready, and then I wasn't ready to quite do anything about it yet, but I kept that door open. I started following Instagram accounts. There were Instagram accounts I wouldn't follow, but I would search for because I didn't want people knowing I was following them. Right. But I would just get on every day and see what their posts were.
Mhm.
and see what they were sharing. And I would never like a post because I didn't want anyone seeing that I was engaging with these accounts. But I just kept opening the door little by little.
Yeah.
And I think so often people are looking for this like quick fix in this process, or looking for, there's just going to be this magic moment where I don't want it anymore. But it is rarely that. It's usually this gradual process. And so I think just letting people know that having patience through this process and patience with with themselves, but continuing to move forward in some way is what's so important.
Mhm.
Whether it's, reading a book, reading a memoir, or following an account, or just seeing what it's like to go to that one place that I always drink at and not drink that time and just see what it's like, right? Like we can dip our toes. We don't have to jump into the deep end right away. And yeah, so I feel like, I didn't realize that that's what was going on for me. And
Mhm.
then, surprise, here I am 6.5 years later. And for me, it was really, there was this telling moment for me, where uh, part of my story is certainly alcohol got really bad after I lost my dad. Like my alcohol use really accelerated and increased. I didn't know what to do with my grief, and I didn't know how to access it. I didn't know how to turn it off, and so I was really using alcohol from this like kind of emotional regulation, this like thing to help me emotionally regulate, and I didn't realize it at the time. But then we got some hard family news about a year and a half later, and I kind of had this another one of those like, whew, just like sort of this slap.
Mhm.
It felt like, where it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to waste any more time or lose any more time with the people that I love and the people in my life. And I had this real, very strong wake up call, and it happened between Christmas and New Year's in 2018. And I had that realization, and I was like, that's it. It's time to do something serious about this. And then Annie Grace was promoting her first live alcohol experiment. I had not read her book. I really had, she was one of the accounts that I was following silently online. And so I ended up joining that live alcohol experiment. And it was the first one, and it was exciting, and it was new, and it was all new information to me. And when I started really looking at alcohol, not just the substance itself of it being ethanol, but also how it was playing a role in my life in ways that I hadn't even been aware of, all of a sudden, 2 weeks into that process, I was like, this has to go on longer. It's kind of like you go in not
Yeah.
wanting to admit to yourself, like, oh,
Mhm.
this is likely going to be forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely didn't want to admit that to myself, but I can look back and see now that, yeah, that writing was certainly on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so it's like you've heard me say, like, I just don't believe in coincidence, right? And
Hmm.
but when you say that you made the decision that you no longer wanted to waste any time not being available or there for the ones you love, um, I find that, a lot of people's driving forces in this whole discovery is truly like just wanting to be available for their family and their loved ones. And so I just think it's like, what a beautiful tribute to your father. And I know the work you have done around that. And so I just think it's beautiful that you are offering that to other people, especially. So
Thank you.
I want to ask you one more question though, because you mentioned at the
Please.
beginning of the call, and I know we're maybe running a little late, but or over, but that's okay. There's so much to share, you guys.
So much.
Like I feel like we need like 10 more of these. So I want if you could just briefly describe to us what is somatics
Oh,
and how
yes.
I know, right? Briefly describe. Okay. And however many, it doesn't matter. There's no time limit. But how did you get into somatics coaching? Because I think for you, just like me, we didn't know how all these parts of our lives were going to merge into one, but they just do. They just become like it. And so, how did you find that, and how did it merge into your alcohol coaching?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think for me that's such a fun one too because it's so I started off coaching just like you through this Naked Mind
Mm-hmm.
Institute, and we became coaches together, and really working with the thoughts and beliefs that people had, and around alcohol, and I found that to be incredibly helpful for me to like understand the substance and then understand like what role I was giving it. But then something started happening for me and also with other people that I was working with, which was that I found that there were these states that people would get into where it became really difficult for them to have any kind of internal access to what we would say, regulation, and they were using alcohol to self-regulate.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that language immediately.
Right.
I had to do some research, and I took a couple of courses and started to better understand and get to know the physicalities involved in the role that alcohol played and how neurotransmitters worked, and the nervous system in general. And when I talk about the nervous system, I'm speaking specifically to the autonomic branch, which, we're really familiar with, like the sympathetic, the
Mm-hmm.
parasympathetic, and those things. And so what I was seeing a lot was people using alcohol to change their personal physical states,
Mm-hmm.
and then also even being in sessions with clients where there would be such a they would have a really hard time breaking out of certain thought loops and belief systems because their internal state was just on repeat, right? And so there was no shift in how they were feeling in their physicality and their physiology. And so it was really hard. Everything's connected.
Yeah.
And so in order to access new thoughts and ideas, a lot of times we need to change our state.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started seeing this in clients, and I was also seeing it in myself, like where I had these patterns I just couldn't break out of. Yeah, I wasn't drinking, but I'm still using similar patterns, similar, these things are, there was still like, I felt like I was still living in some sort of loop that I wasn't quite clear how to get out of. And so as I started doing more research, and I started, doing some practices myself, and then eventually found somatic experiencing, which is really so. I'm now a somatic experiencing practitioner after the last 3 years of working on that, and
Mm-hmm.
really, what somatics is it's the body. It's the body. But beyond the body, it's everything, every bit of it, right? It's the whole, it's the encompassing of. And so what somatic experiencing is it's experiencing all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we get so locked into either just just being in our emotions, or just being in our thoughts, or just being in our bodies. And really, when you're talking about somatics, it's the whole thing. It's the whole picture. And so that's really what led me into it, and what informs so much of my work with people now.
Yeah.
It's hard not to see people through the lens of the nervous system when I'm
Mm-hmm.
working with them. So it's
Yeah.
just, and it's such a gift because I didn't know you could look at a human being in that way, and it's
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Oh, so cool, so beautiful. I know one of my movement mentors talks about how we are one organism. Like we start as one membrane, and that's the osteopath way of thinking. And how like we can't separate our systems. Like we are one. So I love that.
Yes.
So beautiful. Yes, and that we get to experience all of it. Um, so, in our final question that we like to ask everyone that is comes onto the podcast, what is the one way that you are putting life back into living now that you are alcohol free?
So my answer to that is actually, so a year, just coming up on a year ago, I had a pretty severe accident, where there was a lot of disruption for my, like, in my physical capacity and ability in the past year. And so it's so interesting because that question actually makes me tear up, because like this morning I went for a walk and I was thinking, whew, I was thinking about how, just 5, 6 months ago, I couldn't walk further than the block that I live on. And when my block is two houses.
I know.
So I just want to be really clear on that. It's not like a shitty block,
Yeah.
like it's two houses.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I went outside and did like that. And this morning I went on, like, I don't know, it was a 45-minute walk or something like that. And I was just so overwhelmed with
Yeah.
gratitude. And
Yeah.
so there's such, right now, me putting the life back in living is just having so much gratitude for what I am physically capable
Mm.
of doing, like what I've got access to.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that answer I'm sure will shift and change in another month or 6 months, but right now I'm just so present to the gratitude of what my
Yeah.
body's able to do.
As it should change because we don't stay the same, right?
You're
We're constantly
amen.
evolving. Thank
Yes.
the Lord. Um, can't imagine being the same person I was yesterday. Um,
Oh, I love
so
that.
thank you so much, Brandi. I really appreciate all your heartfelt shares today. And you guys, we really appreciate you being here. Please make sure that you share, that you join us again, that you like and subscribe. And I think that's all the things I'm supposed to say here. But again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Becca.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Zero Proof Life. If you found today's conversation helpful or inspiring, be sure to share it with others or leave a review. To learn more about our programs, coaching, and our community for women exploring life without alcohol, visit thezeroprooflife.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep choosing the Zero Proof Life.